Terry was in his early 30s, but the weariness in his eyes made him look older than he was. His smile, the kind that said he'd given up a long time ago. Life hadn't broken him all at once. It wore him down piece by piece, mostly at work, mostly by people who smiled to his face and stabbed him in the back the moment he turned around. Whispers behind closed doors, loud enough to pierce his heart. Colleagues who once seemed trustworthy stealing credit for his work, like it was nothing. The office wasn't a team, it was a battleground, and there was no prize at the end of it. Just gossip, petty rivalries, constant fault-finding, and the kind of teamwork where everyone teams up against you. Terry felt like the world had betrayed him again and again. And then one day, sitting by the window of his cramped apartment, staring at the horizon, the question surfaced in his mind: why am I still here? The next morning, he walked into HR with a calm, unreadable expression and used every last day of vacation he had. By the following day, Terry was behind the wheel, driving out of the city, heading across the country. He wasn't going to a beach resort. He wasn't looking for tourist hotspots or comfort. His destination was something simpler: the woods. A quiet forest nestled behind a forgotten rural town in a state most people didn't even talk about. No cell service, no distractions, nothing but trees, stillness, and the kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. As soon as Terry stepped out of the car, the scent of earth hit his nose, damp, rich, and real. Birds chirped somewhere above, their songs drifting on a soft breeze. The air felt different here, clean, untouched. He had almost forgotten what that felt like. Something inside him stirred, something that had been asleep for a long time. With only a small pack slung over his shoulder, Terry walked slowly into the forest. There were no trail markers, no tourists, no footprints. Just a path shaped by time and nature. Sunlight filtered through the tall canopy, shadows dancing as leaves swayed in the wind. The ground beneath his boots was soft, cool, and damp, and with each step he took deeper into the woods, the noise of the outside world faded behind him. Terry had only planned to hike for a few hours, breathe in some fresh air, and head back to the hotel for the night. But when he returned, sweaty and covered in dirt, the look from the front desk clerk stopped him cold. The young woman behind the counter didn't even try to hide the judgment in her eyes. She scanned him from head to toe like he was some homeless drifter who'd wandered in off the street, not a paying guest like everyone else. The service was nothing like what the other guests received. Terry didn't argue. He didn't demand anything, but deep down, the familiar sting returned. That quiet ache of being dismissed, looked down on, treated like he didn't matter. Again. That night, he made a different choice. Without a word, he turned and walked back into the woods. Something about the trees, the open sky, and the silence felt more welcoming than any building filled with people who refused to see him. Then, exhausted, he stretched out on the ground and slowly drifted off to sleep. But the darkness of the forest doesn't always bring peace. In the middle of the night, whether it was a dream or something else entirely, Terry felt his body lift off the ground. Slowly, weightlessly, he rose into the air as a thick gray mist swirled around him, curling in from all directions. Then he heard a voice.
You who ran from the world. You who lost faith in mankind.
Terry turned toward the sound, and there, in the shadowy swirl of the fog, stood something. It wasn't human, it wasn't an animal. Its form defied all familiar shapes, shifting and uncertain. Its eyes, however, strange, silent, steady, watched him with a calm that chilled him to the core. You were cast aside by the world, but tonight, I offer you a choice. There are two paths before you. One, leave this world behind. Step into a place no human knows, no soul remembers. You will be free of all burdens forever. You will vanish from the world, not forgotten, simply erased. Or two, return to the world you knew, but this time with power. Power no one else holds. Power to rise, to stand, to make every last one of them pay. Terry's heart pounded. Rage, hurt, that hidden yearning buried deep in his chest, it surged to the surface. And deep down, he knew this wasn't just a dream, this was the turning point, and whatever choice he made tonight would change everything. The idea of a new life in some hidden realm had a strange pull, especially for someone like Terry, who was tired of the world. But it was vague, too vague. Yes, the world was cruel, full of liars, users, and backstabbers, but it was his world. He knew its corners. He knew who had wronged him, and more importantly, he knew who deserved what was coming. So he answered, "Give me the power, and I'll handle them myself." The moment the last word left his lips, everything collapsed. The fog swallowed him whole, and his body dropped into a swirling black abyss that felt endless and cold. And then, silence. Everything went dark. Terry jolted awake. It was morning. Sunlight filtered through the branches overhead. The fire was out. The forest was still. He packed up in silence, walked out of the woods, and returned to the hotel. There, at the counter, stood the same front desk clerk. She barely looked at him, just tossed a quick glance upward, her expression full of boredom, then something colder, disdain. Terry stood still, without thinking, without knowing why. The words slipped from his lips. Disappear. He didn't raise his voice. He barely whispered. But in that instant, the woman froze. And then, she vanished. No flash, no sound, nothing. She was simply gone. Terry stared at the empty space behind the counter, blinking in disbelief. Desperately, he jumped in the shower, hoping the water would wash away the panic. But when he stepped out and checked again, the front desk clerk was still gone. Terry picked up the phone and dialed the front desk. The line rang and rang. No answer, no automated message, no voicemail, just silence. So he waited, sat in the lobby for hours trying to make sense of it, staring at the same empty counter. Eventually, long after sunset, a young man in a night shift uniform walked in and stopped short, puzzled by Terry's presence. Excuse me, sir, was the day shift clerk not here when you came down?" "She was," Terry replied, his voice flat. He didn't elaborate. He simply paid his bill, checked out in silence, and walked away. The highway was nearly deserted that night. He drove under a sky smeared with stars, his headlights cutting through the dark. But then, roaring engines behind him, a group of teenagers in souped-up cars weaving between lanes, honking, shouting, laughing. Without thinking, again, he spoke. "Disappear." And they did. Gone, just like that. No skid marks, no wreckage, no sound of retreating engines, just nothing. The road ahead stretched out, wide and silent. Terry gripped the wheel, staring at the emptiness, his breath shallow and quick. His hands trembled. He didn't know if it was magic or a curse. But one thing was certain. This wasn't a dream. The power he asked for had started working. He didn't know where they went. Dead, swallowed by some void between dimensions, erased from existence. But one thing was clear. This wasn't a curse. It was a tool to balance the scales, to make the world answer for everything it had done to him. At home, Terry picked up a fresh notebook. On the first page, he wrote in block letters, "People who need to pay." One by one, he added names, and next to each name, a memory. To outsiders, they were just co-workers, but to Terry, they were something else. Then came the final day of his vacation. Terry walked into the office, standing tall and unbothered, clean-cut, confident. The sliding doors opened with a hiss, and heads turned, and then a voice he knew too well, the voice that always came carrying a burden. John, the senior staffer who'd made a career out of dumping his workload on others, especially Terry. "Hey, Terry, need you to send this report to the client, yeah? No one else has time. You're the only one not doing anything right now." Terry stared at him. Terry didn't even glance at the paperwork in John's hand. He looked him straight in the eye. "I'm busy." John flinched slightly, unsure whether to be offended or just stunned. Okay, whatever. The client's been complaining about the whole department anyway," he muttered before walking off to his usual group. But true to his nature, John didn't let it go. He immediately turned to gossip with another group nearby. "Terry doesn't do shit. Vanishes for a few days, and now he thinks he gets to pick and choose. Guy like him won't ever be good for anything." Terry smiled, then said softly, "Disappear." And in that instant, John vanished, right there in the middle of the office, in front of everyone. He was gone, as if he'd never been there at all. A scream broke out. One of the women collapsed to the floor, hands shaking, her face pale. The team lead immediately called the police. Others rushed to contact headquarters, sweat beaded on everyone's foreheads. Some started checking the security footage with trembling fingers, but the cameras showed nothing. No exit, no struggle, just a single blank frame like he'd been wiped from reality. And in the middle of the chaos, Terry stood silently. He wasn't shocked, he wasn't sorry, but he felt satisfied. Terry now understood exactly how his power worked. And once he realized that the world had never been fair, he stopped holding back. He began dealing with his coworkers, one by one. Eventually, Terry didn't even bother hiding it anymore. He spoke the words right in front of those who mocked him or treated him like he was nothing. One senior employee snapped at Terry in front of everyone. "You ever think of helping someone else? All you do is your own stuff." Terry smiled and said softly, "Disappear." The man vanished, right in front of 3 coworkers. Screams echoed through the office floor. People started quitting. The ones who stayed never dared speak to Terry disrespectfully again. Then he started traveling. He drove back to his hometown, to the high school filled with bitter memories. A teacher who once screamed at him in front of the whole class. Terry whispered through the window, "Disappear." The kids froze as the teacher suddenly vanished. Terry walked away quietly like nothing had happened. He didn't need to see it with his own eyes. Just knowing meant another name was crossed off the list. But then things started to spiral out of control. One day he walked into a restaurant. A strange young man bumped into him without saying sorry. Terry felt a flicker of irritation and met his gaze. "Disappear." The man vanished right there in front of everyone. The sound of crashing dishes filled the air. They ran out of the restaurant like their lives depended on it. Terry began to laugh. "This is kind of fun." After that, he stopped writing names down. There were just too many. Now, whenever he got annoyed, anyone in the wrong place at the wrong time might just disappear from this world. News about Terry spread everywhere. From rumors, it became a wave. From a wave, it turned into fear. There were clips all over the internet, but no proof. The government started to take action. Cops who came to investigate began disappearing, one by one. Now even the police were afraid to get close to him. National security agencies moved in, but no one dared come close enough to hear his voice. All they knew was, if no crime happens, what charge can we pin on him? The first week, wherever Terry walked, people fled the area. Whole streets became empty houses. Shops closed down. Malls shut their doors. Schools announced indefinite closures. The entire city looked like a ghost town. He walked alone on the main streets. Terry was alone. The whole city was his now. No insults, no gossip. No one looked at him with disdain anymore. But it wasn't fun anymore. One night, Terry dreamed. He saw himself in the deep forest again. The mysterious presence that once gave him a choice appeared once more. It told him it was a being from another galaxy. Its species had a rule: never harm or experiment on any life form directly, unless that life form consents willingly. This galaxy had its own laws. On different levels of existence, the lowest species in intelligence could be used for experiments for knowledge, just like humans do with animals. And humans in this universe were ranked at the very bottom. So when humans sent people willingly, it was seen as consent. We only give power to those abandoned by the world, to be experimented on to create heaven or build their own hell." Terry froze. In his mind, he saw the faces of those he had told to disappear. They took those people to experiment in ways beyond human understanding, killing them, then reviving them to test again and again. Those people would reach the deepest pain and despair. No one truly dies. They just die and come back endlessly. Terry jolted awake in his room. Sweat soaked his body. His heart raced. Looking out the window, the whole city was still silent. No one was left. But a voice whispered softly in his head, "There are still billions of lives on this earth." After that night, every time Terry closed his eyes, he dreamed of the cruel experiments. Every night. There wasn't a single night he didn't have to endure it. He began to lose sleep, growing afraid. But the human body can't resist sleep forever, and every time he gave in, he was pulled back into the same nightmare, seeing the people he had sent to disappear being tortured in unspeakable ways. One night, the mysterious being appeared again in his dream. "We've noticed you're starting to break, Terry." Terry almost cried out. "Please stop. I won't say that word again. I've had enough." The being replied, "Very well. You have a choice. 1. You keep going, letting us experiment on the humans you choose. 2. You stop, but your power will be transferred to those you sent before. They will awaken with powers far more terrifying than yours, and we will let them experiment too, starting with you." Terry froze. His eyes widened. It wasn't fair. "This is madness, unfair. Why must I choose this?" The being answered with a calm voice.
"These are our rules, not yours."